Welcome to the Chase Merrell podcast. I am your host, Chase Merrell, and we are all about helping people get freed up from what's holding them back so they can build up who they were made to be.
On today's episode of the podcast, I have my mom, Shelley Merrell, with me today. We just celebrated Mother's Day a few days ago, and I couldn't think of a better way to do that than to share this conversation with the world today. She's incredible, the way she loves people, both my brother and I, my dad, and just the stranger that she meets like the day of. She just makes people feel so loved and seen, and getting to hear her journey and what she's walked through, the ups and the downs, and how she has looked at life throughout that process, I am telling you, is going to be such an encouragement to you today.
If you want to help us continue to make an impact with this podcast week in and week out, consider joining our new Patreon community. For as little as a cup of coffee a month, you can be a part of helping us get the message and mission of the podcast out to more people more effectively. This is a way that we can come together as a community, and you'll get access to behind the scenes stuff, additional resources and content, and so much more for just as little as $5 a month. You can head over to chasemerrill.com and click Patreon to jump in and get started. Today's episode of the podcast is sponsored by Frontline Coffee Co. Delicious, bold, and expertly roasted small batch coffee for the everyday American. Frontline is not just about coffee. They're about supporting responders on the front lines, courageously caring for the rest of us. With every Frontline purchase, a percentage goes to supporting the brave men and women who are doing just that. Head over to frontlinecoffeeco.com and use promo code FREEDUP. That's FREEDUP, all one word, FREEDUP, to get 15% off your purchase. Now let's jump into today's conversation.
Well, this is a special one. I have today on the podcast my mom, Shelley Jean Merrell, with me. Hi, Mom.
Hey, you.
How are you?
Good.
Good. This is awesome to get to sit down with my mom.
Yes, I'm very excited about it.
The thought of having, Mother's Day, this is going to be put out around Mother's Day. And, I knew from obviously the beginning of starting the podcast, my mom is going to be on here. It just was a matter of when. I know, you might be a little nervous being here today, but just super thankful that you said yes and jumping into having a conversation. I can't wait to share more of, who you are with the world and the people that are listening to this podcast on a regular basis, but then those that might come and find it later. Thank you for being with me today.
Yes, thank you for having me.
Yeah. So, this podcast, has been something that has been a journey for me. So far, I think this is going to end up being I think this is going to be the 20th episode that is released.
Wow.
Yeah. That's insane.
Awesome.
You've been such a massive support in a lot of things in life. We'll talk about some of that in a minute. But with the podcast specifically, and, I know that the way that you and Dad and Landon, my brother, some of our family have supported this journey has been monumental for me. Mm-hmm. But so now to get to have you on here, it just is really special for me. So let's do this. Take just a moment and give people just a snapshot, like where are you right now in the world in this season of life? And so people know, just give us some framework of who you are in this season.
Okay. Well, I'm Shelley Jean Merrell, and just turned 58. And I've been married to your dad almost 40 years. This coming September.
Jeez.
Yep. I was 18, graduated in June, got married in September.
Yeah.
And then Dad had just turned 20. And so there our journey starts. Well, kind of. I started a little before that, but I started liking your dad when I was 13. Had a crush on him in youth group, but my mom and dad wouldn't let me date till I turned 16. So it was the big hurry up and wait. Yeah. And then just only saw your dad at youth group or church or activities. And then right before I turned 16, your dad asked my dad if he could take me on a date. And then the story kind of unfolds from there. And so about 2 years ago, this June, we moved here to Arizona after a great 4 years almost in Washington, being next to you guys and the grandkids, getting to be a part of your guys' daily life, which was awesome.
Yeah.
And Dad had the opportunity to come here and finish out his career possibly as building official, and just taking one day at a time.
Yeah.
New season for sure.
we got to talk for a second just about your guys, becoming, you're dating, courting, and then getting engaged and married, just for a moment, because that it's such um, an uncommon story that, there's lots of those that from your generation and before, not lots, there are more of them. There's less of them now. So hearing
Right.
people that are still married, almost
Right.
40 years, but then also that started, at 13 or so,
Right. Right.
is pretty uncommon.
Right.
How was that, like, that moment for you when, dad asked Papa for his permission to date you? Like, were you nervous about that? Like, just talk to me a little bit about that season and that
Um,
moment.
well, Dad didn't tell me. And I didn't know till after my dad told me that he had come over one night when I wasn't home and asked, your papa if he can take me on a date. And my dad said, well, not until I have my first date with my daughter. And then you can take her on a date. So Papa actually took me on my very first date. And then
To
your
kind
dad
of
came.
to kind of show you, like, okay, this is how,
Yep. How
yeah,
I'm supposed to be treated.
yeah.
Yes. And then the next night, your dad got to come and take me on a date. He showed up with the corsage and it was very,
Oh,
very formal. My mom took pictures and yeah, so it was pretty fun. Very special. Yeah.
wow.
Yeah.
And so was
Yeah.
he, if you were, so you were 16, was he still a senior or did he already graduate? I can't remember.
He had already graduated.
Okay.
Um, actually, no, not quite yet. It was April. So he graduated in June from high
Okay.
school.
Okay. So he's
Two
still a
months
senior.
later. Yes. Yep.
Wow.
Yeah. So I still can remember it. And went to a restaurant called I can't remember, but it was an Orange Hill restaurant in California.
Yeah.
And I remember dad just making it real special. And yeah, it was just a very something we had waited for a long time,
Yeah.
just always being with our friends. We were never allowed to be alone together type thing
Yeah.
until I turned 16. So it was a very um special time.
Yeah. 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 And then the fact that you guys got engaged 2 years basically after that.
Yeah. Yeah.
How was it being engaged your senior year, like for a few months, like being around friends and people, like with a engagement ring?
Yeah, it was very exciting. Dad and I were growing up in the same youth group. So, and I went to high school with all the same friends I was in youth group with. And so it was a very big celebration in church and high school. Everybody kind of knew Larry Merrill
Yeah.
and knew that, it was something that they anticipated and knew would happen at one point. They didn't know it would happen so soon. But my dad said, "Are you sure? I'll buy you a new car. I'll take you on a vacation to Hawaii if you'll just wait for a couple years." And I said, "No, I really want to get married."
Yeah.
So yeah, we got engaged in April of 1983, and then got married in September. So yeah,
That's cute. That's
yeah,
crazy.
yeah.
I they hear the 40 number, like that's just mind
Mhm.
blowing when I think
Yeah,
about it.
yeah.
Yeah.
It's mind blowing for me too. Actually, it's
Yeah.
gone by so fast,
Yeah.
and a lot of adventures for sure.
Yes. Yeah.
Yes. Yeah.
And so one of the things that um is, unique to my journey and Landon's journey as men and people, our own lives, is part of the process of how much you wanted to be a mom, as you got married and had become a wife, and that part being, it took a while and was challenging.
Yes.
That,
Yes.
would you take a moment and just talk a little bit about that journey, and you don't have to go into maybe a ton of detail, but I realized that, like, there's a lot of people that I
Hmm.
know who have or are struggling in that space, and to hear just somebody else's journey who's kind of been through it, and what brought you through it, where you are now when it comes to the challenge of having children in that whole process, and just some of the things that led up to it. Would you be willing to just
Sure.
unpack it a little bit?
Yeah. So dad and I, like you said, we got married at 18. He was 20. About the time I turned 20 and dad was turning 22, we're like, we want to have a baby and this kind of thing. And I always wanted to be a mom and never anticipating it would ever be a struggle to get pregnant. And so the journey started and 1 year went by, second year went by. we're like, what's going on? Why? And we're Christians. We love the Lord. I claim the scripture, delight yourself in the Lord. He'll give you the desires of your heart. Psalm 37:4. And I'm like, all my friends were starting to either get married or, back then a lot of kids did get married younger. So I couldn't figure out why the Lord wasn't hearing my prayer or something. And about year 5 of trying, year 6, it got pretty discouraging.
Yeah.
We would go to different churches in the area and go down the altar to be prayed for. It got to the point where I would say, okay, Lord, is there something in my life that I haven't asked for forgiveness for? And then I would look at your dad and go, was there something in your life you haven't asked forgiveness for? Because you're just trying to figure out what's keeping it from happening. So now we're talking about 7 years later. About 6 years, I had started kind of asking Dad to really think about adoption. And Dad didn't feel the urgency yet to go that route. I felt the urgency. And so kind of put the filter out a little bit, started looking at different adoption agencies. Not back then, it wasn't online. It was more, you had to do the footwork to find the agency to get the application packet and that type of thing. And then probably year 7, Dad was away somewhere hunting on a hunting trip. And he called me early in the morning and said, hey, the Lord just laid on my heart that, you have my blessing to go ahead and submit the application packet for adoption. And I was just on it. I mean, there was no wasting time. I got that thing finished. Actually, the packet was already finished, but I just got it off in the mail. And it probably was maybe 3 weeks later, not knowing at the time, but I had conceived you and not knowing it. And so,
wow.
Yeah, it was just like, I don't know if the Lord was just waiting for that willing heart for Dad to say, yeah, you have my blessing to do the adoption process or what have you. But the official time we found out was September, Labor Day weekend type thing in 1990. We found out we were officially pregnant. And by that time, I was already almost 3 months pregnant. And because I think, when you're going through the process of trying to have a baby, the amount of times you'll take a pregnancy test and hear the word negative, it's just gut wrenching. It crushes you. You're sitting in the lobby with all these other women that are there for the same reason to find out if they're pregnant or not. Back then, anyways, they had you sit in the same lobby. And to go through that, you felt rejection, you felt discouragement after prayer. It wasn't like a telephone thing. The nurse would come and call you and say it was negative type thing. And so because of that fear, I allowed almost 3 months to go by until I officially could find out, like, I didn't want any guesses. And I finally, I was so afraid to go to the doctors that in the middle of the night, I couldn't sleep. And so I got up and I just said, okay, Lord, you have to tell me I'm pregnant. And so I just opened up the Bible and it fell to Deuteronomy 7. And it talks about where there'll be no famine in land. And it talks about the animals, giving birth to live, creatures or what have you. And it sounds silly, but it was like the Lord spoke through those scriptures and it talked about no barren, animals in the land or what have you. And I was like, I just started sobbing. I knew the Lord had told me I was pregnant before I officially had a medical test,
Yeah.
So the amount of people in our lives that had been rooting for us, praying for us for over 7 years, 7.5 years, give or take, that week when the calls started going out and coming in that we were going to have a baby, your dad and I probably received over 100 congratulation cards.
Wow.
Just congratulations on having going to have a baby, not having the baby. Like nowadays you just kind of like send a card when someone has a baby, but the rejoicing was so great from my grandparents to my aunts, to my uncles, to my cousins, to our friends in church, to people far and wide. We lived out in Corona, California at the time. I remember that afternoon, people drove from all over to come to our house that afternoon when they found out we were going to have a baby. It was like a big party.
Yeah.
And so I'll never forget that. And then, you were born in April, 1991. And even then, the amount of people, it was just it was a spiritual time, but then it was, of course, a tangible time. But to see God's faithfulness, and also relating, I was so able to relate to so many of the women in the Bible who waited for a baby.
Yeah.
And then they had a son, and so I just knew God had a reason, and you came at the perfect time. So
yeah.
Well,
I just have a lot of friends and people that I know, and I know you do as well, that when it comes to fertility, when it comes to being able to have a baby, or having gone through just the tragedy and the trauma and grief of miscarriage or miscarriages, there's just like you mentioned, the word discouragement, hopelessness, and I think our story, my story, your story, around how the Lord in His timing allowed that to happen years after you had started trying and wanted to, and it's just such a mystery. There's no formula, to it, but just know that, I just know a lot of people that's part of their journey and a part of their struggle, and it's a really hard place to be.
Right.
It seems like something that you can't just get through, like get over, right? It's something that it's totally a process, and
it is.
Would you if like, let's say somebody's listening to this and that's where they're at right now, maybe they have had a miscarriage or miscarriages, maybe they've had negative test after negative test, what's something that you would say to encourage them when you think about where you were at and when you think about where they're at right now?
Looking back, I would tell that young bride or young wife or whatever stage or season that God knows where you're at. He knows your heartache, your heartbreak. And reflecting back, I didn't mention, I'll mention it now. In that 1 year before I had you, I did have a miscarriage, and I didn't know I was pregnant until I had the miscarriage. But 1 year later you came, and then during that miscarriage, the hope came that I can get pregnant. I didn't even know if I could get pregnant. And so when then God gave me that glimmer of hope, that was like the building block. And then also realizing that there wasn't anything that I had done personally that was a punishment from the Lord, or it wasn't some prayer I was doing wrong or right. And also that between your dad and I, the enemy would want to take that situation and turn us against each other, and use that as a discouragement. And then, at one point I even told your dad, hey, I would understand if you wanted to move on with your life, if I can't give you a child, if there's something wrong with you and we can't have a baby, I don't want to stop you from having kids. And then Dad looked at me like, what are you talking about? Like, we're not going to dissolve our marriage because we can't get pregnant. But that's the point I had gotten to, like the discouragement of 7 years of that long waiting period. But looking back now, I just would say trust the process, and that, we don't know how God's going to work things out. And I still to this day would have opened our home to an adoption also. I wouldn't have ruled it out. It's just that's just kind of how it fell into place for us.
Right.
But I wouldn't say, oh, don't adopt because you'll probably get pregnant, or this is my story, so it might happen to you. But I would just say to the person in that deep heart, like that, I got to the point where I didn't want to go to church on Mother's Day. I didn't want to hear anything about someone having a baby shower. I didn't want to hear my friends say they're going to have a baby, because it wasn't just a disappointment anymore. It was heart-wrenching.
Yeah.
And it's a long wait. 7 years is a long wait.
Yeah.
And so I would say not to give in to what the enemy would want you to keep you isolated and want you to get mad at God.
Right.
And I would say just lean even closer into the Lord and take some scriptures that He speaks to you and claim them for you.
Yeah.
And I wholeheartedly believe that. And I know now, of course, now that we see when you were born and what have you, you were born between the 7th and 8th year of our marriage. Looking back, God knew better than us. That's when we were plan to be parents is during that time. And he had a plan for your life and a plan for Lena's life. And if we would have tried to rush it any other way, I think we would have altered God's, purpose. So
yeah, that's so good. And thanks for sharing. I know that's not necessarily a part of a journey that is always the most comfortable to relive or think about, but I just know there's a lot of people in that space that's going to really encourage and help them as they process.
Yeah.
So then a couple of years after I was born, yet another boy, and Landon Philip Merrell.
Yes.
And even, obviously just the two of us growing up, but something that it was, evidently clear to Landon and I, and still to this day we experience this, was how much it seemed like you loved being a mom. Like the joy and fulfillment that you had in your heart being a mom was evident for Landon and I. And that's something that, again, it feels uncommon. I don't feel like, I feel like especially in today's day, like this generation of people in my age and maybe even a little younger, a little older, there's such a, I don't know. I mean, again, this is, I'll have to be careful how I say this, because what I'm not trying to communicate to people is that there's, you should, especially to the gender role stuff, like women shouldn't have to be moms that stay home and the husbands have to work, and none of that is, because you worked a lot throughout, those years as well. But it feels like there's less and less and less of a contentment with motherhood. In regards to like the joy, it's hard. Obviously, it's not always easy, as I've experienced it as a dad, but then watch Holly, my wife, experience motherhood. She puts a lot of work in every single day.
Yes, she does.
But I think about how much I felt that from you growing up. Like my mom loves being my mom. I'm not like some burden to her, or I'm not like in the way of her dreams and aspirations and goals, or, like I feel like she loves me and is so filled with joy to get to be my mom and get to be a part of raising me. Tell me, like, can you tell me your perspective on that? That's how I felt, but like, how was that for you? And just the journey of motherhood in general, raising Landon and I, just some thoughts that you'd have in that space.
Yeah. Well, just to start, Dad and I, because it took so long to have a baby, we're like, well, okay, I guess we'll just pursue the American dream and buy a house and buy a little bit more out of our means, because we're both working full time. This is what's happening. Little did we know we were going to end up getting pregnant right away after buying the house out in Corona, California. And I got to be on maternity leave for about 3 months. And the reality hit when I had to start taking to a sitter at 5:30 in the morning. And it just broke my heart, broke Dad's heart, like, this is not what we wanted, And so we would drive home, traffic, 91 freeway, get home, so excited to pick you up from the sitter. And we barely get like an hour with you and you're dozing off to sleep. I'm like, and I'd be in tears. And Dad's like, that's it. He put the for sale sign in the front yard, and he applied for a second job at UC Irvine because he was a plumber during the day.
Yeah.
And they had an opening for a maintenance man at night. And it would allow us to live in family housing. And my desire to be home full time with you was so strong that owning a house no longer mattered to me over being home full time with you. So that was the determining factor. So from then on, our purpose was I'd be home full time with you guys. And I surrounded myself with other young moms at the campus. Every day we were out with our strollers, our kids, and we didn't have Pinterest. We didn't have social media.
Right.
We didn't have cell phones.
Right.
And we had to mark our calendar when we're going to meet up for play dates at the park and meeting up at the beach or what have you. But I surrounded myself continually with other young moms. We were all purposed to have fun with our kids, teach you guys about Jesus from the very earliest time I could start going to MOPS, Mothers of Preschoolers. I was there taking you guys with me. Dad and I were taking you guys to church from the time you guys were babies.
Yeah.
And I didn't even think twice about owning a house anymore. All those things didn't matter compared to being a mom.
Yeah.
And I just remember just a simple task. And I know I've mentioned this to Holly before, other young moms before, something as simple as folding the clothes. I appreciated it so much that I took it as an opportunity. And when I was folding your garments or Lannon's garments, I would pray for you guys. And I thought something as simple of a task of mundane, routine chore, I could take it as an opportunity for praying for your guys' lives.
Yeah.
And you have to fold them anyways. So might as well make it on purpose, right?
Yeah.
And I really believe those moments mattered, and I made it a priority to be available, let you guys play, be kids, but also we made available teaching you guys about the Lord.
Yeah.
And from the young age of you guys watching videos and what have you. And it I wouldn't say the word rubbed off, but I really believe that you guys watched what happened in the home.
Yeah.
And from a young age, you were asking the Lord in your heart and wanting to tell others in the, apartment community. I used to hear Vine about Jesus.
Yeah. Right.
And, it was almost like the Lord just was all over it. And the joy that Dad and I both had in co-parenting together.
Yeah.
We still enjoy co-parenting together, but the support I had from your dad was tremendous. He saw the importance of me being home with you guys full time. And, and I'm not knocking any parents that both need to work. Everybody has to do what they need to do. But when you are home, be there.
Yeah.
That's my encouragement. When you are home, be there, because the time is going to go by so fast. And,
Yeah. Yeah. It's so good. That's a challenge that I know both husbands and wives, moms and dads, that being present thing when you are home is so challenging. And it's probably more challenging than it needs to be because of how we've allowed, different habits and, even addictions to screens and social media and things that have created it more difficult. But that's such a good reminder. It's something God's been challenging me with more and more as I'm in young stage of fatherhood, raising our 4 kids. But yeah, so I'm thinking about Landon. Okay. Landon is, one of my best friends in the world, as my only brother, my younger brother. And so our relationship we have now, obviously, he was the first episode of the podcast, and I just love him so much, enjoy him so much. And we enjoy each other all together, like our family. Like we just, can't get enough of that.
Yeah.
But just for a snapshot, like we didn't always love and enjoy each other every day growing up. Maybe necessarily as we were younger, but just how was it raising 2 boys that were, less than 2 years apart, and just that idea, like maybe even for those that are there raising young boys or young kids, but maybe some specifically, what are just some things that you're thinking about when you experience that you would encourage people with, or some things that come to your mind and heart when you think about raising boys?
Yeah. Well, for you didn't like to sleep.
Ugh.
You like to be up at the crack of dawn and wanted to be ready to go. And then Landon loves sleep.
Yeah.
And from the time he was a baby, he would take 2-3 hour naps, and then we had you would take off and visit the neighbor while we're all napping.
Yeah.
You're out canvassing the apartments and bringing home a bouquet of balloons. And I'm like, where did you get those?
Yeah, oh my gosh.
But your guys' personalities, it was really good for both of us to raise you both and see the different gifts you both had. And in a lot of ways, I think you and I had more conflict, like the talking back kind of thing when you were in grade school.
Yeah.
Landon was real passive and would do what I would say. Then him and I had more conflict when he was in middle school.
Yeah.
Just that whole talking back and forth thing. But it's been a joy, I think, to see your guys' gifts complement each other. Just the years of seeing you guys play out in the backyard together. You guys would make a plan. You get all your stuff laid out of the accessories you're going to put on for whatever role you're playing, whether it be Army or Hunters or, Marvel characters or Star Wars characters.
Yeah.
You always had a plan. and you needed all the necessary things for that specific role you were going to play. And by the time you got it all figured out, it's time to come in for dinner or something like that, you know? But, and then watching you guys as you grew into like middle school, high school, I was remembering a time when the cell phones first came out, and you already had like, I think you only had your cell phone for like a week, and you had over like 200 contacts in your phone. And then you and I were having this conversation on the phone. I'm like, how can you have 200 contacts in your phone? And back then, you paid for like every phone call, every minute. It wasn't like unlimited, you know, and you were using more data than me, Dad, and Lana combined. And we couldn't find a plan that would be like balanced for all of our phones and stuff. And I just remember going, that's it. You know, you need to limit the amount of phone, you know, contacts you have. And back then I should have seen, even then, the call God had on your life. You know, people were drawn to you, and Landon, people were drawn to him. You each had your own things that you're into, you know. When Lana was out there filming short little clips of little things for school, and then you're out planning for school club events, Bible club events, what have you. You both had these missions in life that are totally opposite, but yet would come together. Yeah. And then I had the great gift of getting to work at your high school.
Yeah.
I got to be the attendance clerk at your high school, Lana's high school. And I got the honor of, sometimes you guys would come in, Mom, I need money for lunch, or Mom, I don't feel good, or Mom, you know, I forgot this at home. I need this for the Christian club today. You know, I need my ice chest. Can you give me permission to drive home, or whatever? It's just like, how awesome is that God even saw through the details that I got to be a part of your lives and your friends' lives. And then our home got to be an open home for your guys' friends. Yeah. And it was a home where the friends wanted to hang out along with you guys. Yeah. And if I could give any encouragement to parents, it'd be, make your home available to your kids' friends, and let your kids have the freedom to bring them home. Even when it's not convenient, whenever you're tired, keep your freezer stocked with stuff they can throw in the microwave. You know, you had friends that were making up things to eat at 3 a.m. You know, we did. And then I got to the point on Sunday mornings, a lot of them would be there waking up after spending the night, and we'd all try to get to church. And it got to the point where everybody had their own personalized toothbrush with their name on it, because I knew we'd have anywhere from 3 to 4 kids at least spending the night on Saturday night, and then they would get rides with us to church. And it's like, I am so thankful for that time and that season of being available, just making it a fun place to be. And I really believe because of that, your friends, Lana's friends, got to see a real loving family that loves their kids, loves Jesus. And it kind of all just was real and authentic. Yeah. So.
Yeah. That piece of one of the things that is probably outside of your genuine love for Jesus and your love for us, and Dad, your family, the thing that I think is the most obvious and special mark on your life is how you engage and see and love people. Mm. That's a broad, but let me try to get a little bit more specific. Like, and when I think about part of how I'm wired when it comes to people, I realize this is where, you know, and Dad loves people really well too. So it's not that he's not this way, but you have just a crazy, like, ability to remember. It's not just remember details. It's like remember the important connecting details with people. Mm. Like from a person that, I mean, and so I see myself in different places and spaces having some of those things over my life too. And I go, okay, it's from my mom. But the thing that I think people, it's unmistakable about you is how much you're willing to engage and remember and not give up on people and friendships and connections. Like the most base level connection with a person that you may have had, if there's some chance someplace else in life that you can have a reconnection with that person, you make it happen, whether it's Facebook message or a letter or a phone call or come to our house. It's so special and it's so refreshing because it's like, you know, I'm sure at some level, at times it's probably been to your detriment, but here's what I mean. It feels like nobody is an inconvenience to you. Like nobody is so much of a burden that you wouldn't make space for, or sacrifice and surrender what you ultimately would want so that they could be cared for. Again, could be to your detriment at times, but also more than not, it has been such a powerful, special thing that has impacted people, and it's obviously impacted me. But like, what does that in you? Why is that you? Why is that there?
Looking at my mom and your grandma, I'm sure I got that from her. I would attribute to her.
Yeah.
Her making, valuing the one, making that person feel seen and noticed. And it, nothing speaks Jesus like loving someone unconditionally.
Yeah.
And being available, noticing them, calling them, like you said, sending them a letter, a note card. The art of sending letters is starting. I feel a lot of people don't do that anymore, or they don't do it as often as they would like. But I really think that's still a very important thing. The value of your taking the time to handwrite the note, put an envelope, put a stamp, mail it.
Yeah.
That says volumes. And sometimes the Lord allows it to arrive on just the right day, just the right time. We hear all these reports of isolation and how people are so highly affected by being alone. And I really am a believer of this. If a name comes to your mind, go with it.
Yeah.
Follow through. Don't think it's an accident. It's not. I don't care if it's 3:00 in the morning, in the afternoon. Usually the Lord will prompt me to think about that person for a reason. If it means to pray for them, call them, send them a card, go with it. That's my encouragement. I don't think it's an accident. And we may not always know the reason they came to our mind, but sometimes we do get to hear the reason they came to our mind. And they both are just as important. And the reason isn't relevant. It's the Lord wanting them to be seen and noticed and loved. And we don't know what's going to draw them to Jesus or keep them with Jesus or keep them on track. But I value people. People, you and I, we've always raised you guys, people over things.
Yeah.
People are more important than things. So, if we could keep that perspective, even people over time, it's not convenient to serve, and it's not convenient to make time for that person, on the phone sometimes, but that's what Jesus would do, you know?
Yeah. Yeah. And that's what is so evident. The Jesus factor in your life. Because there's a great, kind, generous, compassionate, loving people out there. That may not have Jesus in the center of their life, but it is clear that that's what's the driving motivator for you when it comes to people. And that was something I loved about when I got to be in middle school and high school, from playing football, thinking about Mammoth Lakes, California, playing Mammoth youth football, some of those friends to, to the high school friends that you kind of already mentioned. Like, I knew I could bring them around into my home and they were going to experience Jesus by encountering you and Dad. That they weren't going to, and a lot of them, didn't have that, right? They didn't have that in their home, maybe to that extent. And so, to be able to come in and be in a desert of their own family, but to come into our home and see you, and you make space to treat them like you treated me and Landon, and yes, Grandma does this, right? I can see it. She's become everybody's grandma, that all my friends, and you really did that as well as a mom. Like, you just, if they were my friend or they were somebody I was like, hey, or Landon, you were like, what can I get you to eat? Where do you need somewhere to sleep tonight, or whatever? It just, I loved being able to do that with my friends, to be able to know we could be here and you can, my parents are cool, but also they're going to love you. It just was so special to me. But I've watched you guys continue to do that even when it wasn't just about us. And I think that's the thing, I've watched you and Dad do really well, that I want to kind of transition into here, this next chunk. As much as you poured yourselves into parenting and motherhood, specifically for you, while raising Landon and I, when we eventually moved out and we're no longer living in your home under your roof, there was, well, let me say this. Now, even from then, like, you didn't stop loving people and pursuing people and friendships and connections and relationships. Like, you continued to like run hard after that. And it wasn't like all of a sudden that stopped for you, or it was totally contingent on us being in your home. But what I do want to take a moment and acknowledge is that transition period. Because I also, again, speaking of people that I know, speaking of families that I've heard conversations around, the challenge of the transition period of their kids leaving the home, and they've spent however many years, 18 to who knows how long, 25 maybe, years of pouring into raising a lot of their identity and time and energy and resource going into this human being that is now going to leave and no longer be as needing them. It's a huge identity shift. Will you talk to us about that for a little bit? Like, how was that for you? And if you were to give some encouragement to other parents that might be in that season or coming into that season, what's some things that you would encourage them with?
I would say to kind of start having a plan while they're in high school and while they're in college. I think I could have been better at that because I think the transition was very hard. I had to learn a new identity and a new purpose. And also for Dad and I to figure out who we are with each other again. We had to really be purposeful on our relationship and discover, okay, God, what's next? What do you have planned for me? And the Lord has totally opened doors for me. And if I would have been closed at that new chapter, I would have missed out on a lot.
Yeah.
And your story's not over when your kids graduate from high school. And your story's not over when your kids get married. And your story's not over when your grandkids are born. Those are all amazing things.
Right.
And as much as I love our grandkids, I had to realize that I still had a purpose in some other areas of my life that I had to be open to. And just like the first probably 6 months moving here to Arizona, moving away from you guys, that was a big identity crisis for me.
Yeah.
And
right, because you'd gotten to really lean into being grandma for almost 4 years, close proximity, which,
And I had reconnected with my 4 friends, or 3 friends that we had been friends with in Washington since the 90s.
Right.
And all of us that same year sold our homes and moved to different places. And so it wasn't just moving away from my grandkids, it was moving away from friends, and had to be purposeful at my neighborhood. I had to, be open to saying, like, I didn't have anybody to meet. Literally, Dad and I moved here. We didn't know a soul except for he knew us, a couple of coworkers. That's it. And God showed up and provided friendships in just ways I wouldn't have planned.
Yeah.
And he's been using me. And I am so thankful. Like my next door neighbor and coworkers at the school where I sub at. Right now, I'm having the opportunity of working with a sweet, sweet lady that's 78. She has dementia. And I am being blessed by spending those hours with her on Tuesdays and Thursdays. If I would have stayed in that place of not seeing past raising you guys and being in the present moment of mom, grandma, if I couldn't see past those things, I would have missed out.
Yeah.
And so I believe that God will allow us to balance all of it. And I've been in a Zoom Bible study for the last year and a half with some gals on BSF, gals in Georgia. And one of the gals in the Bible study is 92 years old, signing into Zoom every Tuesday, doing Bible study with us. Yeah. And to see somebody in their 90s still eager to learn about the Lord and what God's word says, we can all be mentors. I love to have older women in the Lord in my life, the Marians, the heroes of faith that give me what I need to be encouraged, and also what I need to be like, say, Shelley, you need to, trust the Lord in this area, or um, we're not done until we're done. So I can be grandma. I could be 100% grandma. I could be 100% wife. I can be 100% mom, but I also can be 100% servant. And it doesn't always mean in the church setting. It's in my neighborhood. It's, at the school. It's, the lady that I've come across, I'm working with dementia, just came through my dental hygienist. So we don't know what God's going to do, but I think he wants our heart to stay open and willing to say, okay, Lord, I'm available, whatever you have for me. And I don't have to conjure it up. I don't have to constantly be looking online or on Indeed, or what should I apply for, this job or that job? What am I going to do with my time? Just give my day to the Lord and say, Lord, let me have the conversation with who I'm supposed to talk to.
Yeah.
If it's someone sitting next to you on the airplane, I really believe those moments, God uses those moments,
he totally does.
Random. This is just a little blip.
Yeah.
On Facebook in our community, Oro Valley community. A gal just mentions looking for someone that knows about someone installing barn doors, of all things, barn doors. Oh, yeah, I know someone. Da, 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 da. This lady is a total stranger. We start messaging. They had just moved here from University Place, Washington.
Wow.
And they were going to Pastor Rogers' church there in Puyallup.
Yeah.
And been going there the last 20 years. And we just had lunch together yesterday. And all that to say, come to find out, the guy that I tried to put her in touch with to do her barn doors, no longer even doing barn doors anymore. So it's like, okay, Lord, you just meant for us to meet. You meant out of the universe. She moves here from Washington, didn't know a soul. Yeah. And we have developed a really sweet friendship. And so that only God can do that. Right. Yeah.
Absolutely.
But
see, it takes the availability and the willingness that you like. That's you to jump in and be like, I know somebody. You want to connect with somebody. You want to help them.
Yeah.
True. And so totally the Lord. But like, I have to acknowledge, because so many people don't do that. They're either too busy. They think about all of the unknowns or the fears or the whatever. Right. And you just see people as the opportunity to connect and love and get to know and make feel loved and special. And I mean, I just love it. And I do, like, I think to myself in moments where I've had a few things recently happen where, I've shared some of the stories with you and some of, people in our churches, and God gives me the eyes to see people the way I think he sees them in moments that help pause my schedule, my busyness, my flesh, and then just blows my mind with what he does if I'll actually step into those things. But you've modeled that my entire 32-year life, and the fact that you're still doing it, I just love that, Mom. You inspire me so much in that space. Yeah. When it comes to people.
Yeah. And then again, Grandma. I mean, Grandma does the same thing. She can tell you story after story.
She does.
It could be somebody she meets at the grocery store.
Yeah.
Needed help with something. It's transferable to me, and now it's transferable to you.
Yeah.
And Landon, to our grandkids.
Yeah. Yeah.
So.
It's so good. When I think about living a fulfilled life and an impactful life, which, I mean, this whole podcast, 52 episodes with 52 people who've impacted me, right? You're the one who gave birth to me, raised me. But the fact that you're still making an impact with every day, surrendering it to the Lord and being open like that. Like, you have no idea how many people are impacted the way that they're impacted by you, and you may not until you get to heaven. But like this lady you're talking about, who knows the impact of you just her having somebody to know now and have a friend, have a community, that could be impacting her in this season with their transition. And so that stuff matters. There's just, I think sometimes we lose sight of that. That is just as significant to the Father's heart as whatever big thing we think we could try to do. I think God is just as glorified and just as pleased when he is watching those kind of moments transpire, and he's like, that is it. That's my heart. And I think sometimes we need to have more slowing and pausing and willingness to let go of what we have planned or what we want
So
we
true.
can have moments like that.
So true. So true. Yeah.
Well, I ask this question every episode, and I'm sure there's different ways you could answer it, but I just would say whatever comes to your heart and mind as I ask it this time is probably what is the thing to share. But I have such a passion to help people get freed up from the stuff holding them back. I just see a lot of people feel like they have things they feel called to do or want to do, but they're held back by something or lots of things. And I just want to help people get freed up from those things so they can build up who God made them to be.
Right.
When you think about your life, when you think about like the two parts of it is your life looking back and then even your life present, what's something that you felt like held you back that you have overcome, you got freed up from, that's helped you continue to step into being who you were made to be, building that person and like those things. So far back even, or maybe it's the same thing, but I kind of love a far back, but then also a present. Like, what do you feel like is part of that journey right now?
Fear. I think the fear of rejection, the fear of someone not being interested in what I'm saying or have to say about something, letting go of that and just like I've mentioned, being prompted. Like if you're prompted to do something and you have the Lord in your life, even if you don't have the Lord in your life, I still believe you are prompted to do something for people, period. Right. And then that little voice inside of you when you didn't follow through with that, how that feels.
Right.
And immediately when you said no to it, or you just kept driving anyways, or you didn't stop, or you didn't apologize to someone.
Yeah.
Don't let those things that you're afraid of stop you because, just a small little smidgen of, we can get on our high horse sometime. And I'm a very rule oriented person, black and white. And when someone's not following the rules, sometimes that can really get me going. And God has used those moments sometimes to realize that the rule wasn't that important, that I was willing to risk a relationship with my neighbor over.
Yeah.
Something as simple as that.
Yeah.
And then having to humble myself because I didn't listen to the Lord and I had followed through with my flesh. And it was an HOA situation in our neighborhood. And to have to be humbled and go and knock on that person's door and apologize. It's like, okay, Lord, I am not going to let fear, because I was just going to let it go, and just not look at him when he pulled in his driveway.
And
because it was fear, I was afraid to go apologize.
Yeah.
So I would say the biggest thing is don't be afraid to apologize.
Yeah.
It opens the floodgates of blessings from the Lord for your life moving forward. If you can't apologize and forgive, it'll hold you back.
Yeah.
So, and you won't be built up. Yeah. And you'll miss out on so many of the Lord's blessings. And, I've had relationships, even when you guys were younger, where I had to deal with some forgiveness stuff. And what a freedom. I mean, I'm still in friendships 25 years later because I was willing to say, I'm sorry, I blew it. I shouldn't have said that. I didn't handle it the right way. So I would say, don't let fear and don't let unforgiveness stop you from what the Lord has. I mean, he has a full life ahead of you.
Yeah.
And don't let something that was it's menial now, but probably was really big at the time that you thought it was worth that relationship over. But really in the big picture, I just say there's nothing like forgiveness. And it just lets your heart be filled with joy and just starts bubbling over because you're no longer in bondage to that.
Yeah.
And unforgiveness leads to isolation, vice versa. And when you forgive, it just opens up your whole world and you just see it differently.
Yeah.
And so,
That's so good.
Yeah.
It's so good. Thanks for sharing.
Yeah.
Yeah. Thanks for sharing that. One last piece to this is, we talked about your dating as a teenager, your engagement, you're getting married at 18, having a kid, 2 kids, raising those kids, the transition from them moving out of the house. Just this last piece that I think is so special about you and Dad is the fact that in August, you guys are celebrating 40 years of marriage. And the last, 10 to 12 years or so, or more, 10 to 12 years, has been empty nesting. Mm-hmm. And what I see in your guys' relationship is that it's still pretty connected. Like, mm-hmm. you guys still like and love each other.
Yes.
And enjoy each other and enjoy doing things in life together and mm-hmm. Have a friendship. Could you speak to that for a moment? Yeah. How is that happening?
Yeah.
And what are you enjoying about this season, about being married in empty nesting? Again, not to say it's all perfect or all that, right? Like, we know that that's not true, but again, I just don't see a lot of that in the world. And I think other people would go, how mm-hmm. is that happening? Because I would like to have that in my own life.
Right.
So what comes to your mind and heart there?
Just over the weekend, I got my planner out, and it made me think about years ago when Dad and I were first married. We did like this thing where we sat down, did a 5-year plan, a 10-year plan, 15-year plan of goals. And then I just thought of it over the weekend. We got our planner out, and I go, we need to do 5-year goals again. Like, what do we want to see happen in the next 5 years?
Yeah.
Next 10 years, next 20 years, what have you. I think you are never too old to still have goals and dreams. And Dad and I came to the conclusion we just want to see a lot of places together. There's a lot of places we still want to see and go and do. And on top of that, just being purposeful in church, we were apprehensive of joining a small group again. And, cause like, okay, but it's like we're meeting neat people in our small group, and you're never too old, even for a small group. Yeah. So you can get into a place like, I don't need that anymore. I've been there. I've done that. But as much as we need them, they need us. And, so I would say also just examples of, I was in a women's Bible study at night, and I really was missing Dad on many nights, and I'm like, Lord, I want to be in Bible study, but I really think it's important for my place to be home with my husband in the evening. He's been at work all day. And then if I'm not gone at night, then that's like a whole day we don't see each other, right?
Yeah,
something as simple as that. And when I was making this decision, it was like we just celebrated 39 years. And I really believe the Lord honored my decision to find the same type of Bible study, but online in the morning, so that I could do that and still be available for Dad at night.
Yeah.
Something as simple as that. I really believe God sees that I'm trying to make my husband a priority. Because we can get so busy, 5-6 nights can go by. And if everyone's off doing the different things, that starts to create a distance in your relationship.
Yeah.
And so recognizing date nights and, even though we don't have kids and stuff, it's still easy to go a long period of time without going on an official, like, let's go on a date. Let's go have, go to a concert or go to see a comedian or whatever. It's like, you still need those things to look forward to in your relationship. That's what keeps the fun there.
Yeah.
And also praying together. Dad and I pray together all the time. We pray for you guys, pray for our grandkids, pray for our nieces, nephews, family.
Yeah.
Unsaved loved ones. I would say individually keeping the Lord first, and then realizing that Dad and I are on the same team.
Yeah.
Pulling for all of you guys. Yeah. And so thankful. But also, we get to see the fruit of our prayers when you guys were young, seeing both of our sons love the Lord with all their hearts. And now they're both married to women who love the Lord with all their hearts.
Yeah.
And now we're seeing it trickle down to our grandsons and granddaughters. There's no greater gift than that.
Yeah.
Than to see your kids love the Lord.
Yeah. Yeah. So good. What's one of your favorite things about Dad? When you think about him, when you think about that 18-year-old young boy that pursued you and asked your dad for permission to date you, to the almost 60-year-old man that he is going to be this year. What's one of your favorite things about him? Well,
he'll still randomly say, "You're my best friend." Still to this day, it could be 7 a.m. "You're my best friend," and he still brings me coffee every single morning. He makes the coffee. He sets the timer at night, and we have our first cup of coffee together every morning. And so I just think that him making me feel like I'm still special, like I'm like his girlfriend, I'm his wife, it's like he makes me feel loved and appreciated. Yeah.
So good.
Yeah.
Well, I can't express in words how much I love you.
I love you too.
How much I've been built up by you in my life, and just from the formidable years of being in your house as a young boy to a young man, to then the years I've been out. I'll never forget driving to Modesto. Was it Mother's Day weekend? I don't remember what it was. It was tough.
Yeah,
right before Mother's Day.
Yeah, I was going to mention that. Actually, it was the Monday morning right after Mother's Day.
Yeah,
2012. I remember I dreaded going to work that morning because I knew when I got off work, you would be gone.
Yeah.
And one of the things you always did as a high schooler, you lined up all your shoes under your bed.
Yeah.
And when I walked up the stairs and opened your bedroom door and saw all your shoes gone, I lost it.
Yeah.
I just started crying. And that's when it hit me. He's gone.
Yeah.
And that was just 4 or 5 months before you got married, 6 months before you got married. But that's when it's like, oh yeah, he's gone. But it's the Monday after Mother's Day, 2012.
Yeah. Well, this is going to be, let's see, this is going to be going live the Tuesday after Mother's Day of this year.
Perfect.
So
perfect.
yeah, perfect way to but just I the way you've still loved me and built me up as a man of God, as a husband, as a dad, since that Monday, 2012 of May, after Mother's Day to now. I don't know a safer person in my life that I could be broken, I could be struggling, I could be hurting, I could be happy, all those things that I could call or text or whatever, show up at your door and know that I'm gonna get loved and just embraced in a way that it's soul like. It's not just the physical. It's just you're special, and you're obviously special to me, but you're so special to so many people, Mom. And I'm inspired by your life. I love the faithfulness and the consistency that you've been able to continue to love people so well, no matter where you're living or what your job or non-job or transition. You've found a way to keep people more important than things or time, and it's marked me. Like I want to be like that more and more because I see Jesus all over it. So, and then the final thing, just watching you love my wife and the way that you care for her and pursue her.
We love Holly. Yeah.
And how she's gotten to develop a friendship with you. That is really special. And then the way you love my kids. I just got to have an episode with Holly's dad, my father-in-law, Kelly. You know him.
Yes.
A couple episodes ago, and talked about that with him, the way he loves our kids. But to watch you be grandma to Wes and Bo, Delaney and Joy, I could just sit and watch it all day. Like you just are so good at being grandma and loving them and engaging them and making them feel seen and loved and special, and yet still the moments that need to be corrected or
that's the hardest part. It's the correcting part.
But you just do it so well. So
love
you a lot.
Wish
you too. We could spend more time together and praying that gets to happen more in the near future. But thanks for taking the time to be a part of this today.
Thank you for having me. I love you, and I'm very proud of you. And I couldn't ask for anything more in a son.
Yeah, appreciate it.
You make me proud. Love you.
Love you too. Love you too. Well, with that, thanks for listening, everybody. See you next time.
Bye.